My name is John, and this happened last December when I was home alone for an entire week. My girlfriend had gone to stay with her parents for the holidays, and I stayed behind because of work. I live in a quiet neighborhood, in a small town in upstate New York. The houses are spaced fairly far apart, and most of the residents on my block leave town for Christmas. That meant I basically had the entire street to myself. At first, I enjoyed the silence. I figured I'd relax, catch up on some shows, and soak in the calm atmosphere. But what happened that week still lingers in my mind. It was my second night alone. Around 6:30 p.m., darkness had already swallowed the sky. A light snowfall had dusted the ground, covering my yard and driveway in a thin white layer. I was in the kitchen preparing a simple dinner, just pasta and chicken. I'm not much of a cook. My girlfriend usually handles that. I had the TV playing quietly in the background, mostly to make the house feel less empty. While I was eating, I heard something strange. At first, I couldn't place the sound. Then I realized it was singing. I muted the TV and listened carefully. The sound was coming from outside. As it grew clearer, I recognized the tune, Jingle Bells. At first, I thought maybe it was some neighborhood kids messing around. But the voice didn't sound young. It sounded like a grown man. I stood up and walked toward the front door. With every step, the singing grew louder. By the time I reached the door, it sounded like it was coming from right outside on my porch. A strange knot formed in my stomach, but I still assumed it was probably just a caroler. I opened the door. Standing under the glow of the porch light was a man who looked to be around 35 years old. He wasn't wearing a hat, and his coat looked far too thin for the cold. But the strangest part was that he seemed completely absorbed in singing, staring down at my welcome mat as if I didn't even exist. I forced a polite smile. I had no idea how to react. I'd never had carolers before, and definitely not a single grown man doing it alone. He didn't look aggressive, just off confused maybe. I even wondered if he might be mentally impaired because he didn't react to my presence at all. When he finished the song, I expected him to speak or walk away. Instead, he took a breath and started singing Jingle Bells all over again, in the same slow, off-key voice. This time he looked directly at me. The smile dropped from my face instantly. I stood there awkwardly, pretending to listen, hoping he'd stop on his own. He didn't. He just kept repeating the song. I checked my phone. Nearly 4 minutes had passed. Finally, I thanked him politely and closed the door, hoping that would signal the end of it. It didn't. The singing continued, uninterrupted. I returned to the table and tried to focus on my food, but it was impossible. Something about the situation felt deeply wrong, like someone standing far too close to your personal space. After about 10 minutes, the singing stopped. The silence that followed made my heart drop. I walked back to the door and peered through the window. The man was still there, but now he was standing at the end of my driveway, facing the house. He wasn't singing anymore. He was just standing there, motionless, watching. I cracked the door open and told him this was private property and that he needed to leave. He didn't move. I warned him I would call the police and shut the door. I watched from the window for another minute. He didn't budge. I didn't want to call the police yet. I kept telling myself maybe he was mentally unwell and didn't understand. I didn't want to make things worse. So I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and tried to calm myself down. Before changing, I glanced out the upstairs window. He was gone. Relieved, I got into bed and started reading. About 20 minutes later, I heard it again singing. This time, it was coming from my backyard. I jumped out of bed and rushed to the window. The man was standing directly below it in the snow, staring straight up at me while singing Jingle Bells. I slid the window open and shouted that I was calling the police. The singing stopped instantly. He stood there in total silence for a few seconds, then suddenly bolted toward the back door. What happened next still chills me. He began screaming, not a normal scream, but something wild and inhuman, like a deranged death metal vocalist. He slammed into the door, kicked it, and yanked on the handle with terrifying force. I could feel the vibrations all the way upstairs. I grabbed my phone and called 911 immediately. I backed into my bedroom closet, gripping a baseball bat while the operator told me to stay hidden. The screaming and banging continued, echoing through the house. Then just as suddenly it stopped. Everything went silent. I stayed frozen until the police arrived. They searched the property and confirmed the back door was still locked. Outside, they found deep footprints in the snow, marking exactly where he had stood beneath my window and where he had run off into the woods behind my house. They followed the trail briefly but eventually stopped, saying it wasn't worth going too far into the woods at night. They acted like it wasn't a big deal and told me people behave strangely sometimes. After they left, the house felt hollow and cold. I locked every door and window and checked them repeatedly. I ended up spending Christmas Eve and Christmas at my parents' house. As far as I know, the man never came back. At least not that I know of.